From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
These are tumultuous days for higher education, but at the University of Rhode Island, they are also exciting ones. URI leaders were at the State House this week to make their annual pitch to lawmakers for continued support and to tout recent achievements, like the school's designation as an R1 research institution and its #1 ranking by the Wall Street Journal among public universities in New England. Can URI sustain those gains amid major shifts in federal policy toward the nation's colleges? We'll ask our guest this week on Newsmakers, URI President Marc Parlange. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Ted Nesi is off this week. Later on in the program, Target 12 investigator Eli Sherman will join me to talk about an upcoming high-profile trial beginning on Monday. But first, University of Rhode Island President Marc Parlange, welcome back to the program. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
So a few things to congratulate you about, including the Wall Street Journal designation that I talked about in the opening of the show. As a UMass Amherst grad, I take issue with it, but congratulations to URI nonetheless. But the big one, I think, is URI is now a R1 research institution. Briefly, what is an R1 designation and why is it so important to the university? Why did you do it?
So it's a Carnegie evaluation. They look at universities every 3 years, and basically what they look at is it's for research. So they look at numbers of PhD students, the breadth of the subjects, and then they look at the research funding. So our portfolio of grants and total support, but also our breadth of grants. So that's important.
So for people watching at home that have zero connection to the University of Rhode Island, why is an R1 designation important to the state, if at all?
It's so for a public research university like the University of Rhode Island and for the state of Rhode Island, this is extremely important. The greatest thing that America brought to the United States, I would argue, is the research university, our knowledge economy, where we are, all the inventions that we really take for granted today, from polio vaccine to work in genetics to computing to many of the other inventions, obviously with many other aspects that are very important to Rhode Island, such as aquaculture and coastal resilience. All of that came because of the research university, and it was really funded research that allowed the university with the graduate students to really develop new knowledge and translate that knowledge in important ways for the state of Rhode Island. It also allows us to incubate new companies, so we have a lot of companies coming out of our labs, but we also attract companies. Companies come to the state of Rhode Island who want to work with us. So for example, on the Narragansett Bay campus, we have companies that really that are very interested, for example, in undersea technologies. So we're working hand in hand there together with our students. And then finally, what's very important is that research informs our education programs. So already from first year, we have students doing research in the neurosciences, in nursing, in pharmacy, in engineering, and you go across the fields, business and so forth. And so that's why it is so important for America.
Well, rumor has it, though, research is expensive. And, we're going to be talking about the turmoil for higher ed coming up, coming from Washington later in the show. But it dovetails, I think, with the conversation here. And I do wonder, with the Trump administration sharply curtailing research dollars for colleges, it sees not in line with his agenda. Will URI be on the hook for funding research on its own to maintain that R1 status if that funding goes away?
Yeah, so I can say that certainly in the last weeks we have had grants that have been pulled, very important grants in public health and other aspects of health.
Have you totaled it? Can you give us a figure of how much money
we're talking about? Well, the largest one is our USAID funding that was terminated, which has to do with fisheries research. So the United States is the best in the world in fisheries management. University of Rhode Island plays a key role in that. And so that, for example, was some $70 million of funding that would be over the coming years. So we'll see what happens ultimately if some of it is returned and so forth. But it's extremely important. We have ongoing research in Fiji, in the Philippines, in Indonesia, Madagascar, Ghana. And it's of global importance, and this is where the University of Rhode Island has impact, not only on the state of Rhode Island and on people living here, but globally we are an important university.
So to the original question though, if that money does not come back, and I know you want it to, but if it does not, is it going to be the university's responsibility to backfill it in order to maintain R1?
So for us, what's very important is obviously support of our students. We want all our students to be able to complete their studies who are supported on grants. So we're working very hard now to find alternate sources of funding. We are turning to our alums to help us, and so we are, working in that aspect of development as well. We are also talking quite a bit with industry. Industry wants to hire our graduates. Industry, let's make this partnership very strong with the state.
President, I got to ask you about this. We're taping this on a Friday morning. My colleague Ted Nesi and some other national outlets, including the New York Times, reported last night that the Trump administration will freeze $510 million in federal contracts awarded to Brown University. That's the other R1 institution in the state of Rhode Island. President, $500 million, that is a stunning figure. What was your reaction to that?
It's going to be, this is quite serious. This is obviously, we have lots of collaborations ourselves with Brown University. Brown is an important research university in the United States and in Rhode Island. So this will have a massive impact as well on the state of Rhode Island. I think it's really important to recognize just the roles, and we're different universities. Sure. We're complementary. But Brown is leading in many critical areas that will be impacted by this.
President Christina Paxson released a statement last month stating universities would not compromise on academic freedom in response to the Trump administration. I do wonder, as a person who is in a similar position as President Paxson, who's been a regular guest on this program, do you view the funding freeze as retribution to those statements at all?
No, I think it is more of an attack on higher education as a whole. As a whole, and obviously they are going after certain name universities at the moment. But I would have to agree with President Paxson that we have our principles, we have our values, and we have a strategic plan for the university. And it's really about our commitment to the state of Rhode Island. It's about student experience. It's about inclusion in the university and how we are welcoming to all. And then finally, we want to modernize our research universities. So I don't believe it's retribution for that. I think it's more of an attack on higher education, which has done so much for this country.
We have to go to a break in about a minute, but I want to just wrap up this segment with, I want to read you something from the president of Assumption College in Massachusetts, Greg Weiner. He wrote an op-ed for the New York Times, headlined, "Colleges have to be much more honest with themselves." Now, I don't know if Mr. Weiner wrote that headline. Usually editors write a headline, but he writes, quote, "As a sector, higher education is considerably left of the American public," adding later, "We decry state censorship while ignoring a comparable threat to free expression on campuses, the crushing pressure inside many colleges and universities to conform with dominant political views." In other words, many, if not most college campuses are in reality a hostile environment for anything outside sort of the progressive viewpoint, rather than being this sort of zenith of free expression. Do you agree or disagree?
No, I completely disagree on that. I believe that our university, in being an inclusive, welcoming, we have students from all backgrounds, we have faculty from all backgrounds. We are interested in developing new knowledge and educating the next generation. That is what we want. I think it's very important to remember that we are Rhode Island's land-grant and sea-grant university. What we do really lifts up the communities. We were founded on the basis of admission of students that came from rural areas or other areas that traditionally did not go to university. And that was part of the great American dream, is to be able to welcome students to real world-class research universities and to be able to develop their careers. And so I am thrilled with the uplift, and I talk to our graduates, and they're obviously across the political spectrum. So I don't quite agree with our colleague who wrote that.
All right, when we come back, if you haven't been to the Kingston campus in a while, there's a lot going on, a lot of construction there. We're going to talk about capital projects happening at URI. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Our guest this week is URI President Marc Parlange. President, I was on the campus this weekend and saw the Fine Arts Center under construction. It's supposed to open 2025. Hopefully it does. I believe you're also embarking on some new residence halls, so a lot of cranes in the skies there, if you will. A lot of major capital projects happening at URI. Always a good sign for growth rather than shrinking. And maybe this has already been calculated, but tariffs, with the Trump administration that they've put into place, will that make any of these projects we're talking about more expensive, or are you going to need to re-examine them because of these costs? Are you talking about that?
Oh, absolutely. So we always re-examine all our projects. We anticipate certain costs, but there are always changes. So we are used to that. We have, as you mentioned, the fine arts will be online next year, so that's very exciting. We have a number of projects underway in athletics, thanks to the state legislature who supported us. Very grateful to be able to improve our athletic facilities. Out on the Bay campus, our ocean robotics building is nearing, halfway, you could say, to completion, and we're already in the design phase for the next phase of ocean engineering and oceanography out on the Bay campus. And on our own campus, as you mentioned, the dormitory is very important. We'll be having 1,100 more beds.
But are they going to get pricier? Do you think those capital projects are going to be more expensive?
They will, and we will see and adjust as need be.
Are there other aspects of campus life that could get more expensive? I mean, one of the things we see at home is grocery prices may go up. I assume that can affect your dining commons. Is that being affected by tariffs yet?
We would anticipate yes, and that's actually, so we are the real world in that sense too. So we pay the same prices for eggs and veggies and so forth. So all of that has to come into play. We put, I'll have to say, I'm very grateful to a lot of our alums who are stepping up to support our students in food security. It's a real challenge. We don't always like to talk about it, but it is a real challenge for a lot of our community. Our community really welcomes everyone, and with that we have wealthier students and we have less wealthy students, obviously.
So everyone in higher education talks about a demographic cliff, that fewer college-age people will be out there, and the pie is getting smaller, particularly in the Northeast, I would say. And yet it was a record year of applications nationally, but especially at URI. Why? When we look at the demographic cliff that's sort of hanging out there, but yet record applications.
The University of Rhode Island is a fantastic university, and so we've had the demographic cliff in the Northeast for the last 8 years, so it's not like it's going to come. No, we're already in the cliff, as you pointed out, in the Northeast, but we are attracting students all over the Northeast, but also from the rest of the United States. And so I was actually 2 weeks ago meeting with alums and colleagues and companies that we're working with in San Francisco, met a number of prospective students that want to come out here. We offer specializations in the marine sciences, in engineering, and pharmacy and nursing. And we also offer a lot of integrated opportunities. Students love to come and do theater, fine arts, music, as well as take their major in business or in engineering or in the sciences. The other thing that is very important is we have a language program that is really growing. So our Japanese program is growing. It's probably the fastest growing program we have at the university. Our Mandarin Chinese program, our Chinese flagship, is just outstanding. And then our languages, German, French, Italian, and Spanish, is attracting a lot of students. And we're also having a lot of interaction with those countries.
So the out-of-state mix at URI has been growing. I believe last time I checked, it was like 53% out-of-state, 47% in-state. The pessimist watching at home will say, well, that's just because URI wants to hire out-of-state tuition. What I'm hearing from you is it's more about survival, that you need more of the out-of-state students to apply, to be accepted in order to weather that demographic cliff.
It's very important. I always tell our students from out of state that they are the new Rhode Islanders, and many of them ended up staying. So it is, and many of them are the ones that are actually starting the company. So that's a very important piece. I have to note that all qualified Rhode Islanders who apply to the University of Rhode Island are admitted, and we want them to thrive here, and we support their education full on. So, so to all Rhode Islanders, please apply to URI and come to URI.
All right, yeah. URI President Marc Parlange, thanks so much for joining us on the program. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
When we come back, a high-profile trial kicks off on Monday. Target 12 investigator Eli Sherman joins us. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers.
It's been nearly 3 years since criminal charges were levied, even longer than that in terms of an investigation. He has looked forward to his day in court, and we're happy to be underway.
That's defense attorney John McDonald outside Washington County Superior Court on Tuesday. He represents Aaron Thomas. That's the former North Kingstown High School basketball coach, criminally charged in the so-called naked fat test scandal. I'm joined by Eli Sherman. Eli, you and I were at Washington County Superior Court most of the week, and it was our reporting from 2021 that relaunched a criminal investigation in Thomas being charged. Now, he has pleaded not guilty to those 2 counts. We're taping this on a Friday morning. We're expecting a jury to be impaneled today, and opening arguments scheduled for Monday. That could change by the time folks are watching this at home. But look, Eli, as I said, we were at jury selection this week. I always find jury selection, which, you know, when they're narrowing down the jury, it's called voir dire, interesting. What was your takeaway from that?
I think just the sheer size of it, Tim. I mean,
like the number of people.
The number of potential jurors.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to get down to 12 with 2 alternates, so 14 people. They started at over, 200 people.
Right.
The pool that they're drawing down from. And one of the things we heard from the attorneys of both sides is that they're really concerned about having not having a partial jury.
Yeah.
So they're trying to find people who can be really objective in this case because, it's dealing with really serious allegations of child molestation and sexual assault. And, we heard the defense attorney, John McDonald, ask a lot of questions about whether or not jurors could sort of put their emotions aside in the case and really look at the facts of the law and make a determination on that. So just really interesting questions. And it's such a big deal. This story, as he mentioned, has been going on for well over 3 years.
Yeah, 2021.
And so there's been a lot of news coverage. We've been covering it for years. And I was actually talking to an attorney outside of the courtroom who's totally unrelated to the case. And they said another problem in South County, Washington County, is that everybody knows each other. So, it's not just a matter of a lot of news coverage, but there's really a lot of familiarity down in South County. So finding a panel, no matter what, is tough.
Finding a panel that doesn't know about the story, it's getting a lot of media coverage, but even maybe knows a witness that could take the stand because it's such a tight community down there. Well, the big question, I think, for all of us, and I think it's probably true in any criminal trial, is will the defendant take the stand in their own defense? And usually the answer is no. I asked Thomas's other attorney, John Calcagni, if they have made a decision on that yet. Here's what he had to say.
Well, as in any criminal case, as you all know, a defendant has no obligation to testify, and if he or she chooses not to, the jury is not to draw any negative inference from that. So we'll be looking for jurors that are committed to that important constitutional principle of law. However, whether or not Mr. Thomas takes the stand in this particular case is a strategic decision that will be made a little bit further into the case.
But you're open to it?
Absolutely.
One of the reasons I think it's important for reporters to cover jury selection is we can get sort of a sense of where the case may go. And in questioning John McDonald, for the defense questioned potential jurors as they were winnowing down to that 14, as you talked about, 12 and 2 alternates. John McDonald was asking them if they would take issue with Coach Thomas lying to a detective during the investigation, and if he took the stand, would that taint his overall testimony on the stand? Just remind folks what McDonald was exploring there.
Yeah, so initially when detectives interviewed Aaron Thomas, he told them that the testing happened, but that the students were not naked.
Right.
We know that that's not true, and even the defense now is acknowledging that that wasn't true. I think that the testing happened to 600 former student athletes over the nearly 3 decades that he was coaching and teaching there. And as we know from our reporting, and now the defense is acknowledging, they were often naked during these tests. And so what McDonald is really trying to explore is, okay, if you learn as a juror that the person that you're considering, whether he's guilty or not guilty, lied, does that immediately make him not credible to you? And so I think he was trying to suss out what jurors could look at that and say, okay, maybe he was nervous, maybe he just, law enforcement questioning you, that doesn't speak to his character, but just, maybe he made a mistake in that moment.
Under the pressure.
Under the pressure.
Yeah.
And it is very unusual, as you said, for a defendant to take the stand because it opens up so many
We should
things
say why,
happen.
because not only will John McDonald, John Calcagni, the defense attorneys, ask Aaron Thomas questions, so will the government.
Yep, and it really opens you up to making mistakes or saying things that really can sway a jury. And so we don't see defense putting the defendant on the stand often in trials, but sometimes it happens that you feel like your best defense is actually hearing from the accused themselves, making the case for themselves. So the defense obviously is going to make that decision based on the jury pool that they end up with today, Friday, and also probably how the case is going and how they feel like things are unfolding. They may make sort of a Hail Mary at the end and say, look, Aaron Thomas, your best defense at this point is you going up and really explaining yourself.
This all took place at North Kingstown High School, where he was a basketball coach. You and I will be commuting to South Kingstown for the foreseeable future. This could be a pretty long trial. Yeah,
we learned this week that the prosecutors, the government, plan on calling 20 witnesses.
Right.
The defense somewhere between 5 and 9, I think. And so they're expecting 2 weeks of testimony.
At least.
At least. So we could, we've already gone through a week of jury selection. It could be 2 more before even the jury has it in their hands to decide.
Superior Court Judge Melanie Wilk-Thunberg has allowed cameras inside the courtroom. Eli and I will be there every single day, so make sure you catch our coverage on 12 News. We'll have updates. 12 News at 4, 5, and 6 for the next 3 weeks or so until a verdict is reached or something different. And you can always catch up on the stories on WPRI.com. Thanks to Marc Parlange from URI, our first half guest. I'm Tim White. Ted Nesi will be back next week, and we'll see you next week on Newsmakers.